Jesus to be my God. I never even thought that he would be. Jesus was a cuss word, and Yeshua was his name. I go to sleep one night, and I hear my mother waking me up and saying, Liat, kumi, kumi, Yeshua or Mashiach. She says, wake up, Yeshua is the Messiah. Hi, my name is Liat. I was born and raised in a suburb of Tel Aviv, in Bat Yam. Right after I finished my military service, I decided to travel to the United States. And then I met my husband, who was not Jewish, but it didn't matter to me. There was a connection. We both were seeking God, and everybody in the family was worried, how are you going to raise kids? And, where you're Jewish and he's Christian. But I was very stubborn, and I was convinced that you can do it if in a spiritual way, where we just both respect each other's holidays and each other's practices and all that. He really respected, my choice to seek my spiritual roots and to understand them. Our son was turning 13, and I really wanted him to be bar mitzvah. So the only place that let us have his bar mitzvah was an Orthodox Jewish organization. And they were so sweet, and they were so welcoming, and I thought maybe that's what I need to do. I need to become more like an Orthodox Jew, because they seem to know what they're doing. They know how to pray. They know God. The kids would go Sunday to church and Saturday to Orthodox synagogue. I started to realize at some point toward the end of this experience, there were some things that were strange. Well, first of all, I had a conversation with the head rabbis, and he told me that I have to divorce my husband. And I had a beautiful marriage. Besides this religion issue that was growing bigger and bigger as a monster in our family, we had love for each other, and we were raising children. I didn't want to divorce him. Other boys, when they go out to read from the Torah, they would call out their names like Shimon, the son of Abraham. And when my boys would go up to the Torah, they would say, Noach Eliyahu, the son of Liat. Slowly I realized that as far as they're concerned, Greg, my husband, doesn't count as their father, and that was very hurtful. I went to Judaism to find God, and I didn't find him through all these rituals. And so I had this voice telling me, this is not God. And I love my people so much, and I wanted to belong to them so much. But I had a feeling, and I knew that I'm never going to be in a place where the father of my children is not welcomed. So I still needed God. I did not want Jesus to be my God. I never even thought that he would be. So I developed this other God. I said, okay, I'm going to have something spiritual. It would be love, justice, honesty, and beauty. I really tried to convince myself that that's going to be my God. And something in me in my life was breaking while my husband is really starting to develop this big faith in Jesus. He comes to me and he tells me, Liat, I believe in the same God that you do. I believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So I told him, well, if you do believe in the same God that I do, why can't you just be Jewish? Why can't you just forget about Jesus and all this stuff and be Jewish, and then we can just have a wonderful life together? And in the house, Jesus becomes the enemy. Every book that he buys or he reads, if I see it, I turn it around or I stuff it in a drawer. He starts hiding it. He's learning and reading in secret. Here I am. I'm saying the father of my children is not going to be rejected. I am starting to reject him. I'm rejecting him. I'm hitting a place where I'm working really hard to be good, but I'm realizing that I'm really not good at all. That God that I invented is not saving me. I need someone to save me from this, and I don't know how. And I'm breaking down. I go to sleep one night, and I hear my mother waking me up and saying, Liat, kumi, kumi, Yeshua or Mashiach. She says, wake up, Yeshua is the Messiah. That morning I woke up, something changed me. That was not a dream. I know it was not a dream because first of all, I didn't know who Yeshua was. I never heard that name. But I know she was talking about Jesus for some reason. I didn't know who was it. And then the next night, I go to sleep, and Greg was telling me, Liat, you're yelling Yeshua, Yeshua through your sleep. I knew that what he was saying was right. I just was afraid, that what is he going to think about me? I told him, I think I believe in Yeshua. The next night, I went on my knees and I said, Abba, Adonai, if this is true, could you give me one more dream? I don't know. I said, could you give me one more dream? And I went to sleep and I had one more dream. And I woke up and I knew, I said, this is it. I know that Jesus is my Messiah. And then I knew that was what was missing, that in that fork that I arrived to, is that I was bad. And it was not that I was bad. I knew that I was not a murderer. I was not a thief, but I could never be on that level that is expected of me. No matter how much I tried, no matter how I exhaust myself, I couldn't. And that I needed a Messiah. I needed someone to save me from that. The first thing that I did, that I woke up that morning after my third dream, is I wrote in Hebrew. I went to the computer. I didn't want any American, any English-speaking person to tell me about Yeshua. So I went on the computer and I wrote in Hebrew, Lama Yeshua. And I wrote, why Yeshua? And One for Israel came. And One for Israel and all One for Israel's angels started to explain to me things that I didn't understand. One of my biggest fears was that I will lose my Judaism because I love being Jewish. They explained to me how Jewish believing in Yeshua is. And I did, for the first time in my life, I finally felt more Jewish than I've ever felt in my life. All of a sudden, also the gap between me and my husband was gone. I felt like, wow, I can see so clearly now. I was just a new person. I went to sleep hating Jesus. I woke up loving Yeshua. I don't know how to explain it.
You got to first shave your head. You dress all in black. You've got to wear a white robe, eat only kosher foods. You've got to become a vegetarian. You face Jerusalem. You've got to face India when you pray. You pray only in Hebrew, and you grow a nice big beard. And if you do all of those outward cultural things, you'll discover the God of the universe. And I'm thinking, this is crazy that someone thinks that they can force their culture on God and that God's going to be impressed by what you wear, what direction you face when you pray, what you eat, and all these sorts of things. It seemed to me that if there was a God out there who could be known, he should be able to be recognized no matter where I face, no matter how I'm dressed, because he's God. Growing up, we always understood that we had our Bible and the Gentiles had their Bible, the New Testament, and that they were two completely separate books. Because the only people I knew who were believers in Jesus were all people in our public school who were Italian Catholic, I imagined that Jesus was Italian. And so the understanding that he's actually Jewish was a shock. And then to hear that the New Testament was written by Jews, I couldn't believe it. My expectation was that the New Testament was like my grandparents had told me. It was a book on how to persecute the Jews, and it's something you should stay away from. Of course, when you're told you should stay away from something, curiosity gets the best of you, and you've got to see it. When I opened the New Testament, I was expecting to find a handbook on how to persecute the Jews. My grandparents had warned me that it was written by people who killed the Jews. That's what I was expecting to see, and yet when I'm opening it, I'm reading a story written by Jews about Jewish people. The New Testament was a fascinating book. And so as I opened this book in the library, I kind of looked around, made sure that none of my friends had seen me taking a Christian Bible off the shelf. And I open it, here's the first sentence. It says, "This is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham." So 3 people are mentioned, and they're all Jewish. I was very shocked. And as I continued to read, I'm reading the story of a Jewish man who was born in a Jewish village, in a Jewish country, and one day walks into a synagogue and announces that he is the Messiah. The more I read the words of Jesus, the more I became attracted to him. It was as beautiful as anything I had ever read in any other part of the Bible. As I came to faith that Yeshua, that Jesus was the Messiah, it was clear that that was the most Jewish thing I could do. This is not a person who's a renegade to our people. This is the one who was promised in our Bible, the 53rd chapter of Isaiah. It is astonishing. If you would just read that chapter, just without the Bible being around it, you would say, oh, this is some Christian Bible. This is Jesus. When you realize, though, that it's in the middle of our Bible, our Jewish Bible. When I first came to faith, I dared not tell my father because this is a time period in the 1970s when there were lots of gurus and cults, and he was very concerned about me getting involved in some crazy sect and going off someplace. So I waited for months, and when I finally told him, he was very skeptical. On his own then, he started to read about Jesus as well. About 1.5 years later, I told him that the fellow who wrote one of the books that he had read, that this fellow was giving a lecture in the city of New York. And he agreed to come out to hear that person. And one of the most amazing moments of my life was the speaker said, "Would everyone here who is a Jewish believer in Jesus, would you raise your hand?" And I raised my hand. My father also raised his hand. And I looked over and I said, "Pop," he didn't say would all the Jews raise their hand. He said, would all the Jewish believers in Jesus raise their hand? And my father looked over and he said, yes, I heard what he said. The decision to come to faith in Jesus as the Messiah was not something that was a momentary lark. It wasn't something that was a passing fad. And I could see changes in myself that I knew were not from within myself. I had kind of tapped in to a truth for our Jewish people that was very powerful.
At one point I said, well, what do you think of Jesus? Do you think he was the Messiah? That just really aggravated him. It made him angry.
How can you expect me to believe in a God whose name my people have been killed? I don't care if it's true. I will never believe in Jesus.
And that conversation ended with me walking home down the mountain in the dark. It was not a pleasant encounter.
I grew up in a loving Jewish family. My mom and dad were very actively involved in the local synagogue, and we were there pretty much every Friday or Saturday. We celebrated the holidays at shul. We celebrated Passover at home, and my Jewish identity meant a lot to me growing up. I decided to go to college, where I majored in fashion photography, and then after I worked in the photo industry for a couple of years, I decided to fulfill my lifelong passion of learning how to ski. I drove myself to Aspen, Colorado, where I knew no one, got a season pass, and started skiing. Aspen was heaven on earth, and that's where I wanted to live the rest of my life. And so it was there during my second ski season that I met a young woman from Kansas City, Missouri, perhaps the most curious person I've ever met in my life. In fact, she has a journalism degree from the University of Missouri. She began talking to me about her faith in God. And she told me that she was a Christian. And I said, "Oh, that's nice, I'm Jewish." She kept asking me questions.
Do you believe in God? Well, what's he like? Is he personal? Does he want to have a relationship with you?
What? What do you mean, what's he like? And I said, he's other, and we're here, we're down here. He's infinite, we're finite. She kept asking me questions and about God and about what I believed about God and why I believed it. And the more questions that she asked me, the more upset I would become with her. I would get angry with her. How can you expect me to believe in a God whose name my people have been killed for 2,000 years? She appeared to me as being narrow-mindedly dogmatic. But it was over time, as she asked me questions about what I believed and why I believed it, it began to occur to me that maybe I was the one who was narrow-minded and dogmatic. I knew Jews don't believe in Jesus. I knew you can't be Jewish and believe in Jesus. But the more she pressed me to explain why those things were true, the more I realized I didn't know, other than because. After she left, I decided, well, I'm going to start reading the Bible for myself to see what it says. And so, of course, I wouldn't go anywhere near the New Testament because I knew for a fact that the New Testament was Goyische Bubamaisis. It was Gentile grandmother stories. And everybody knew it was anti-Semitic, and so I would have nothing to do with that. And so I decided, okay, I'll start reading in Genesis. What I discovered was that the God of this woman was my God, was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That really touched me. It really challenged me inside because it made me realize that I didn't know my own God, or at least I didn't know much about him. As I read more of the Bible, I began thinking more about my relationship with God. And I got to a point where I actually started to pray personally, like talk to God. God, if Jesus is the Messiah and you want me to put my faith in him, then I'm willing to do that, but only if it's true, because if it's not true, the last thing I want to do now is to worship a man and be an idol worshiper. I began to really think about what it meant for me to become a believer in Jesus. What would my parents think? And what would my brothers think? What would my aunts and my uncles and my cousins, what would 90% of my friends, at least my friends from New York, think? It was like I was thinking about this, and it was as if I heard a voice in my head say to me, "Danny, that's right. The choice is between following me and everyone and everything else. If God is God, he's boss. You do what he says, and if there's a cost involved, it's worth it." This woman came back at the end of the summer, and she brought with her, when she came back, she brought with her a book that a friend of hers, her best friend, had given to her. And the title of the book, you ready for this? The title of the book was, "What's a Nice Jewish Boy Like You Doing in the First Baptist Church?" All of the questions I kind of had floating around in my head that I wasn't willing to ask directly were addressed in the book. Jesus was Jewish, and the apostles were Jewish, and all of the New Covenant, the New Testament books were written by Jews. To this point, I had never still opened the New Testament scriptures. But reading this book, I began to read them for myself for the first time. I grew up in a neighborhood that was mixed Jewish, mostly Jewish and a lot of Catholic. And so for me, Jesus and the New Testament was associated with those kids and the hatred that I got from them. And I was shocked to discover the exact opposite. I discovered a Jewish man addressing Jewish topics in a Jewish way who taught love for your enemies, love for all people, not the kind of hatred that I saw. And this Jesus, who was the God of the Gentiles who hated the Jews, began to evaporate because he didn't exist. I finished the book and she says to me,
So, what did you think of the book?
I thought for a minute and I said, it was good. I liked it. I think it's going to help me explain some things to my parents. And she was completely taken off guard. And she said, you mean you believe that Jesus is the promised Messiah of Israel? And I said, yeah. She says, now you believe that he died on a Roman cross as a payment for your sin? And I said, yeah. And she said, and you believe that by trusting in him and what he did for you on that cross, your sins are forgiven and you have new life with God? And I said, yeah. After I had come to faith in Jesus, it took me a few months to build the nerve to tell my parents about it because I knew it would be hard for them.
His parents did not take it well.
My mother's response was just classic. Don't talk to me about Jesus. Don't tell me about him. I will never believe in Jesus. I was born a Jew. I will die a Jew. I don't care if it's true. I will never believe in Jesus. You gotta love God's tenacity with his people. Even as he sent someone into my life to tell me about Messiah, it was people who knew Messiah who helped my mother come to faith at the age of 86 years of age. And I had the most awesome privilege of leading my mom to faith in Messiah. You may be wondering about the identity of this very curious shiksa from Kansas City, this journalist who had such a profound impact on my life. And yes, what you are guessing is true.
How is this going to come across to him and what is he going to say? And so we sit him down and my mom looks at me and I look at my mom and we share the news that we have come to believe in the Jewish Messiah of Israel. And I was waiting for his finger to kind of go to the front door and say, leave, and never come back again.
You had a very specific moment where you actually realized that he is actually who he said he was. What was that moment for you?
I was in my bedroom and for 13 years, I had thought, I just can't believe in Jesus. It's just a line I can't cross. Yeah. And it was that moment of realizing, actually, I didn't have to betray my Jewish heritage to believe this. And it was this big moment of change for me because I thought my whole life I wanted to believe this. So for 13 years, it's like, I want to believe this, and I can't. I just can't do this to my grandparents.
Yeah. What was holding you back?
Well, my grandparents had narrowly escaped the Holocaust, and for them, that was the ultimate betrayal. For me to say that I believed in Jesus, I would be becoming a Gentile. It was like a knife wound for them, and I adored my grandparents. Yeah. I just felt like I could not do that to them. It was like, how could I do this to them if I loved them?
But how did you hear about Jesus in the first place?
I had close neighborhood friends that we went and played at, and I used Jesus as a curse word. That's all I knew. Right. And she said to me, my mom said, if you're going to play at our house, you can't use Jesus' name like that. And so in an instant, I knew that Jesus was something very different to them. Yeah. And if I wanted to play at this house, I needed to figure this out. So it just created a curiosity for me of who is this Jesus that's a curse word for me, but for them, something sacred.
Okay, so a curiosity develops into a desire to believe in him.
Correct.
And how did that happen?
There was this insatiable hunger to want to know more. And so I figured out that if I sleep over on a Saturday night at their house, I get to go to church with them.
Right.
And I don't think my mom fully realized this. So that was kind of what happened, is like I figured, hey, my parents are gardening on a Sunday and there's nothing wrong with gardening, but I get to go to hear about God in a place of worship. And so that was how it started for me.
What was your family life like?
It was just a loving, adoring home. And it was because of that that I felt like, how could I do this to my grandparents, who I adore so much? I just can't do this to them.
And how did you come to know that faith in Jesus was a betrayal to the Jewish people psychologically, in the psyche of the Jewish people? How did you come to find that out?
The Holocaust.
Because of the Holocaust?
Yeah. My grandpa was 18 years old when he narrowly escaped. The story goes that his brother was in the French resistance army at the time, and his parents said, here's the money to escape, and if it gets worse, we'll come. And none of them escaped. So I grew up with that narrative, and then they would talk about that, not often, but I knew what they had been through.
Right.
My Jewish identity was not religious.
Yes.
It wasn't even secular. It was cultural, and it was because of the Holocaust.
And you connected the Holocaust with Christianity.
I knew that it was us and them. And if I was going to believe in Jesus, I was going to be on the other side of the equation.
That makes sense. And what changed then?
One night, I read Stan Telchin's book. It's called Betrayed. And that's how I had felt my whole life. The title was like, if I believe in Jesus, I'm going to betray my heritage. I'm going to betray my people. I'm going to betray my grandparents. And here was a religious Jew who had come to believe in Jesus. And I thought I was the only, I don't know why, but I thought I was the only Jew in the whole world who would consider something as crazy as believing in Jesus. And here was someone who was religious, was part of a synagogue, was a leader in a synagogue, and was believing this. And I thought, oh my gosh, I actually can believe this. I'm not betraying my heritage to believe this. So my mom reads the book, and a number of other circumstances in her life bring her to a place of coming to accept that Jesus was the Messiah. And actually, my mom had a fuller orbed realization than me. For her, her entire life changed. And she then was like, okay, Nikki, you got me here, and you're not leaving me here alone. Really? Like, because I was kind of like, yeah, this is true. I had my aha moment, but I'm heading off to college, and she was relentless. So she became a follower of Jesus, and we were baptized together, but we were secret believers. We didn't tell the rest of our family.
How long were you guys keeping it a secret? Yeah.
A year.
Okay.
And then someone lovingly said to us, you know, they're going to find out. We live in a tiny town. My mom was the town hairdresser. Everyone knew everyone. Yeah. Someone's going to tell you. Someone's going to tell them. Yeah. It better come from you. So my grandmother was off playing bridge that day, and we went and told my grandpa.
Were you like?
No, I was shaking.
Trembling, yeah.
Yeah. I still have a visual remembrance of what that was like.
Wow.
Of how is this going to come across to him, and what is he going to say? Right. And so we sit him down, and my mom looks at me, and I look at my mom, and we share the news that we have come to believe in the Jewish Messiah of Israel, that he is Jesus. And there was this like pause. And my grandpa was bigger than life kind of personality, and I was waiting for his finger to kind of go to the front door and say, leave, and never come back again. So when he was silent, that's what I thought was going to come. And instead he said, Mazel Tov. I believed since 1949 that Jesus is the Messiah.
You're kidding me. I'm sorry.
It's a pretty amazing story.
So wait a second. You guys were living in secret.
Mm-hmm.
But he was also living in secret as a secret believer.
Yeah.
What was that moment like for you guys as a family to come together?
I'm like, well, how did this happen for you? What happened?
Okay.
And so he shared that in 1949, He was actually in America. He sold a very rare form of fur coat, and he was looking to export this product. He was here with my grandmother, and on the way back on a ship, he met a Lutheran pastor. And the Lutheran pastor sat with him and opened the Bible with him and told him about Jesus being the Messiah. And he said it made sense.
See, that's what I'm talking about. A lot of people that come to faith in Jesus come to it intellectually as well.
Yeah.
It's not just it feels great. I'm part of this community and they love me and it's fun and it's different and it's not what my parents are doing.
Right.
This makes sense. Let's look at it. Let's open the scripture. Let's open the New Testament. But not just that. Let's open the Tanakh, the Hebrew scriptures, and see what it's pointing to and see that it's fulfillment.
He had that intellectual understanding that Jesus was the Messiah, but didn't know what to do with it. So from 1949 until 1990, he's kind of dormant in his faith, aside from this intellectual understanding.
Okay.
And so he was like, oh, so you're followers of Jesus? What does that look like? And we're like, well, we've been going to church for a year. He goes, I'm coming with you to church. And we were like, wow. And yeah, we're going to get baptized. Oh, I want to get baptized. So it was just this well, and then my grandmother comes home that day. She'd known about her husband, but she obviously didn't know about my mom. And she goes, oh, great. So 3 generations, my husband, my daughter, and my granddaughter now all believe in Jesus. I mean, that she came home from her bridge game that day to find that out.
Okay, this just keeps getting better and better. Okay, so...
This is all in 1 year, mind you.
My goodness.
Way back in 1990. And so she was one of those classic people that said, I don't need to believe all of this, but I'm not being left in the dust. I'm coming along. And so she came with us to church. She became the Jewish mama of the church. She made her matzo ball soup. She loved on everybody. She loved the songs. Wow. And it was a really slow progression of God wooing her to himself. And my grandparents were actually baptized together. Isn't that cool?
I love it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm floored. I usually say I'm touched, but I'm floored by this amazing story of how God works within families and how we could think one thing our whole life and it's something completely different. And I think it's a good lesson. We don't want to say something because we're afraid of what the consequences might be. But God can use these beautiful moments to do His work. And I think we can help anybody that's watching. We can calm their fear and anxiety about sharing the gospel, realizing that that's just what we have to do. Is just talk about it. And allow God to do His work.
I mean, I just think, imagine that we hadn't told my grandpa. Imagine we kept it secret. We could have. It was tempting to. If you had told me that my family of 3 generations would all come to believe that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah in 1 year, I'd have told you absolutely couldn't even have seen it.
Of course.
It was a work of God. There's no doubt about it.
I get that too. Let's just, for an example, I'm sitting with you and I'm saying, Nikki, I'm Jewish. I've been told I'm not supposed to believe in Jesus. I'm kind of curious. What would you say to me?
I would say to you, there's biblical evidence for it. So I would say, open the Bible, see what the Bible says, read the New Testament. But I would also ask you to say, God, just show me. If it's true, just show me. Because anyone can convince you, but as much as someone convinces you, someone can convince you otherwise.
Absolutely.
I feel like in my own family, God had His number on each one of us and made Himself known to us in a unique way to each one of us independently.
Yeah.
And so that's my encouragement, is to say, if you really want to believe this, ask God. If Jesus really is the Messiah, I want to believe. If He's not, I don't want to believe it. But if He is, would you show yourself? Would you make it known to me in a way that it's undeniable?
Amazing. Yeah, He's good to show Himself.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, Nikki, thank you. You've blessed me, and you've blessed the viewers with this amazing testimony. Thank you for sharing it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate it.